The rain hammered against the windows of the Manning estate, a massive mansion that stood like a fortress on the hills overlooking the city. Inside, 28-year-old Maya Johnson moved quietly through the marble hallways, her worn shoes making barely a sound on the cold floor. She carried a basket of freshly laundered clothes, her arms aching from the day's work. It was nearly midnight, but her shift was far from over. Maya had been working as a maid at the Manning household for 6 months now. She had taken the job out of desperation, needing to support herself and send money back home to her sick mother in a small town 3 hours away. The pay was decent, better than anything else she could find with just a high school diploma and no connections. But the work was exhausting, and the hours were long. She often didn't finish until well past midnight, especially when the family hosted their frequent dinner parties and social gatherings. The Manning family was one of the wealthiest in the country. Richard Manning, the head of the household, was a billionaire who had built his empire through tech investments and real estate. He was 42 years old, tall and imposing, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see right through people. He had a reputation for being ruthless in business but fair with his employees. Maya had barely exchanged more than a few words with him since she started working there. He was always busy, always on his phone, always rushing from one meeting to another. Richard's wife had passed away 4 years ago in a tragic car accident, leaving him to raise their son alone. 7-year-old Daniel Manning was a quiet, thoughtful child who spent most of his time either in his room or in the library. The boy had his mother's gentle features and his father's serious demeanor. Maya had noticed him watching her sometimes as she worked, his big brown eyes following her movements with curiosity. Tonight, Maya was particularly exhausted. She had been up since 5 in the morning, preparing breakfast for the household staff, cleaning the guest rooms, helping the cook with lunch preparations, and then serving at a dinner party that Mr. Manning had hosted for some business associates. The guests had finally left around 11, and Maya had spent the last hour cleaning up the dining room and kitchen. As she climbed the stairs to the second floor to put away the linens, she heard a soft, crying sound coming from one of the rooms. She paused, listening carefully. It was coming from Daniel's bedroom. Maya hesitated. She wasn't supposed to interact with the family members unless specifically asked to do something. The head housekeeper, Mrs., had made that very clear on her first day. But the crying continued, and Maya couldn't just walk away. She set down her basket and gently knocked on the door. The crying stopped immediately. Maya waited a moment, then knocked again. This time, a small voice answered from inside. "Who is it?" "It's Maya the maid. I heard you crying. Are you okay?" There was a long pause. Then the door opened just a crack, and Daniel's tear-stained face appeared in the gap. He looked at Maya with those big, sad eyes, and her heart broke a little. "I had a nightmare," he whispered, "about my mom." Maya glanced down the hallway. Mr. Manning's study was at the far end, and she could see the light still on under the door. He was probably working late again, as he often did. She knew she was breaking the rules, but she couldn't leave this little boy crying alone in his room. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded and opened the door wider. Maya stepped into the room, which was decorated with posters of planets and spaceships. Books were scattered everywhere, on shelves, on the desk, even on the floor. It was clear that Daniel was an avid reader. "Do you want to talk about your nightmare?" Maya asked, sitting down on the edge of his bed. Daniel climbed back onto his bed and pulled his knees up to his chest. "I dreamed that Mom was calling for me, but I couldn't find her. I kept running and running, but she was always too far away." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She thought about her own mother, lying sick in a hospital bed miles away. She knew what it felt like to miss someone so desperately. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I know how much you must miss her." "Dad never talks about her," Daniel said quietly. "He gets sad when I bring her up, so I stopped asking questions, but I think about her every day. I don't want to forget what she looked like." Maya reached out and gently touched his hand. "You won't forget, and you know what? It's okay to talk about her. It's okay to miss her. Your dad probably doesn't talk about her because it hurts too much, but that doesn't mean you have to keep it all inside." Daniel looked up at her, his eyes searching her face. "Do you think she can see me from heaven?" "I think she can, and I think she's very proud of the smart, kind boy you're growing up to be." Daniel gave her a small smile, the first she had seen from him. "Thank you, Maya. Can you stay until I fall asleep? I don't want to be alone." Maya knew she should say no. She should go back to her work. But looking at this lonely little boy, she couldn't bring herself to leave. Of course, I'll stay right here. Daniel lay back down on his bed, and Maya sat beside him. She began to tell him a story about a brave knight who traveled to distant lands, searching for a magical star that could grant wishes. As she spoke, Daniel's eyes grew heavy, and soon his breathing slowed to a steady rhythm. He had fallen asleep. But as Maya started to get up, Daniel's hand suddenly grabbed hers. Even in his sleep, he held on tight, as if afraid she would disappear like his mother had. Maya tried gently to pull her hand away, but every time she did, Daniel would stir and grip. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was almost 1 in the morning. She was exhausted, her back ached, and she still had work to finish. But she couldn't wake this child who had finally found some peace. So Maya made a decision. She carefully lowered herself to the floor beside the bed, still holding Daniel's hand. The carpet was soft enough, and she was so tired that she knew she could fall asleep anywhere. As she settled onto the floor, using her free arm as a pillow, Maya thought about the strange path her life had taken. A year ago, she had been working at a diner in her, dreaming of going to college someday. Then her mother got sick, and all those dreams had to be put on hold. The medical bills were piling up, and Maya had taken the first job she could find that paid well enough to help. She didn't regret it, though. Her mother had sacrificed everything to raise her after her father left when she was just a baby. Now it was Maya's turn to take care of her. If that meant scrubbing floors and sleeping on carpets, so be it. Maya closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. She didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway or the door slowly opening. Richard Manning had been working in his study, going over contracts and financial reports for a new project. It was his way of dealing with stress and grief. If he kept busy enough, he didn't have to think about the empty space in his life where his wife used to be. He didn't have to acknowledge how much he was failing as a father, always working, always distant, unable to give Daniel the emotional support he needed. Around 1:30, Richard decided to check on his son before going to bed. He did this every night, a small ritual that made him feel slightly less guilty about his absence during the day. He walked quietly down the hallway and gently pushed open Daniel's door. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. Daniel was sleeping peacefully in his bed, which was normal. But beside the bed, curled up on the floor, was Maya, the young maid he had barely noticed since she started working there. She was still in her uniform, and she was holding Daniel's hand. Her face looked exhausted even in sleep, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Richard stood frozen in the doorway, trying to process what he was seeing. Why was she in his son's room? Why was she sleeping on the floor? He felt a surge of anger at first. This was completely inappropriate. He should wake her up immediately and demand an explanation. But then he looked at Daniel's face. His son looked more peaceful than Richard had seen him in months. There was a slight smile on his lips, and his sleep seemed deep and restful, and he was holding the maid's hand like it was a lifeline. Richard's anger faded, replaced by a confusing mix of emotions. Guilt, because clearly his son had needed comfort tonight and Richard hadn't been there for him. Curiosity about why this young woman would choose to sleep on a hard floor instead of leaving his son alone. And something else, something he couldn't quite name, a kind of respect or admiration for someone who would show such kindness to a child who wasn't even her own. He quietly stepped into the room and knelt down beside Maya. Up close, he could see how young she was, probably not even 30. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her hands looked rough from hard work. She had a beautiful face, peaceful and kind even in sleep. Richard gently shook her shoulder. Maya's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she looked confused. Then she saw Richard looming over her, and fear flashed across her face. She tried to sit up quickly, accidentally pulling her hand away from Daniel, who stirred but didn't wake. "Mr. Manning, I'm so sorry," Maya whispered urgently, scrambling to her feet. "I know I shouldn't be here. Daniel was crying, and he asked me to stay until he fell asleep, and then he wouldn't let go of my hand, and I didn't want to wake him, so I just—" "It's okay," Richard interrupted quietly, surprising himself as much as her. "You don't need to apologize, I just want to understand what happened." Maya took a deep breath and explained about hearing Daniel cry, about the nightmare about him asking her to stay. As she spoke, Richard listened carefully, and with each word he felt his guilt deepen. His son had been having nightmares, and Richard hadn't even known. His son had needed comfort, and a stranger had provided it because Richard was too busy working. "I should have called for you," Maya finished. "I'm sorry, it won't happen again." "No," Richard said firmly. Then more softly, "I mean thank you. Thank you for being there for him when I wasn't." Maya looked surprised. She had expected to be fired on the spot, not thanked. "He's a wonderful boy," Maya said. "He just misses his mother very much." Richard nodded, his jaw tightening. "I know, I just don't know how to help him. Every time he brings her up, I don't know what to say, so I end up saying nothing. Maybe he just needs to know it's okay to talk about her, that he's not alone in missing her." Richard looked at this young woman who somehow understood his son better than he did. "You're right. I've been avoiding it because it hurts, but that's not fair to Daniel." They stood in silence for a moment, both looking at the sleeping child. Then Richard noticed Maya swaying slightly on her feet, exhaustion clear on her face. "When did you last sleep?" he asked. Maya shrugged. "I got a few hours yesterday afternoon. I'm fine." "You're not fine. What time did you start work today?" 5 in the morning. Richard checked his watch. It was almost 2. "That's 21 hours. That's not acceptable." Maya's eyes widened with fear. "Please, Mr. Manning, I need this job. I promise I can handle the hours. I won't fall asleep on the job again." "I'm not firing you," Richard said, "but I am going to have a serious talk with Mrs. about the staff schedule. No one should be working 21-hour days." He paused, then made a decision. "Go home, get some real rest, take tomorrow off." "But sir, I can't." "That's an order, not a request. Go home, sleep, and come back the day after tomorrow. And Maya, thank you again for what you did for Daniel tonight." Maya nodded, still looking uncertain, and quietly left the room. Richard watched her go, then turned back to his son. He carefully adjusted Daniel's blanket and gently brushed the hair from his forehead. His son didn't even stir, lost in whatever peaceful dream he was having. As Richard left the room and returned to his own bedroom, he couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. There was something remarkable about a person who would sacrifice their own comfort for someone else's child. Something that spoke to a character and kindness that Richard rarely encountered in his world of business deals and corporate strategies. He also couldn't ignore the uncomfortable truth that the scene had revealed about his own shortcomings as a father. He had been so consumed by his work, using it as a shield against his grief, that he had neglected the one person who needed him most. His son was suffering, having nightmares, and reaching out to a maid for comfort because his own father wasn't available. That night, Richard made a promise to himself. He would change. He would be more present for Daniel. He would learn to talk about his late wife, no matter how much it hurt. His son deserved better than an absent father hiding behind his work. But even as he made these resolutions, Richard found his thoughts drifting back to Maya. There was something about her that had caught his attention, something beyond the obvious kindness she had shown Daniel. Perhaps it was the quiet strength he saw in her, the way she carried herself with dignity despite the exhaustion and the difficult work. Or perhaps it was simply that she had reminded him that there were still good people in the world, people who acted out of kindness rather than self-interest. Maya returned to the Manning estate 2 days later, still worried that she might have lost her job despite Mr. Manning's assurances. She had spent her day off visiting her mother at the hospital, using the time to sit by her bedside and read to her. Her mother had been sleeping most of the time, the medication making her drowsy, but Maya cherished every moment she could spend with her. When Maya arrived at the mansion, she was surprised to find Mrs. waiting for her in the staff room. The head housekeeper was a stern woman in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and a face that rarely showed emotion. Maya braced herself for a lecture or worse. "Maya, Mr. Manning wants to see you in his study before you start your shift," Mrs. said, her expression unreadable. Maya's heart sank. This was it. She was going to be fired. She should have never entered Daniel's room, no matter how much the boy was crying. She had broken the rules, and now she would pay the price. She made her way to Mr. Manning's study, her hands trembling slightly as she knocked on the heavy oak door. "Come in," his deep voice called from inside. Maya entered to find Richard sitting behind a large mahogany desk, papers spread out in front of him. He looked up as she came in and gestured to one of the leather chairs across from him. "Please sit down." Maya sat nervously on the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap. Richard studied her for a moment, and she couldn't read the expression on his face. "I've been reviewing the staff schedules," he began, "and I discovered that you've been regularly working 18 to 20-hour days, often 6 days a week. Is that correct?" Maya nodded slowly. "Yes, sir, but I never complained. I can handle the work." "I'm sure you can, but that doesn't make it right. I spoke with Mrs., and apparently this has been standard practice for the household staff for years. My late wife used to manage these matters, and after she passed, I'm afraid I neglected to pay attention to them. He paused, looking almost uncomfortable. I'm changing that. Effective immediately, no staff member will work more than 10 hours a day or more than 5 days a week. We're hearing additional help to cover the workload. Maya stared at him in shock. She had never heard of an employer voluntarily reducing hours and hiring more staff. Usually it was the opposite. That's very generous, sir, but I need the hours, the pay. Your pay will remain the same, Richard interrupted. Despite the reduced hours, consider it an overdue correction to an unfair situation. Maya didn't know what to say. This seemed too good to be true. Thank you, Mr. Manning. I don't know what to say. There's something else, Richard continued. Daniel has been asking about you. He wants to know if you'll read him a story before bed. I would be happy to if that's allowed. Richard nodded. I've been thinking about that night I found you sleeping on his floor, about what it means. Daniel has been struggling since his mother died, and I haven't been there for him the way I should be. You showed him kindness when he needed it, and that means something. He leaned back in his chair. I'd like to officially add to your duties if you're willing. In addition to your regular work, I'd like you to spend an hour each evening with Daniel. Read to him, talk to him, whatever he needs. I'll pay you extra for this time, of course. Maya felt her eyes welling up with tears. She blinked them back quickly. Mr. Manning, you don't have to pay me extra for that. I'd be happy to spend time with Daniel. He's a wonderful boy. Nevertheless, it's additional work and you'll be compensated fairly for it. Do we have an agreement? Yes, sir, thank you so much. As Maya left the study, she felt like she was walking on air. Not only had she not been fired, but her working conditions had dramatically improved, and she had been given the opportunity to help a child who clearly needed support. It seemed almost too good to be true. That evening, after finishing her regular duties, Maya knocked on Daniel's bedroom door at 8 o'clock. The boy opened it immediately, his face lighting up with a huge smile. Maya, Dad said you were going to come read to me. I am. What would you like to read tonight? Daniel pulled her into his room excitedly and showed her his collection of books. They settled on a fantasy novel about a young wizard attending a magical school. Maya sat in the chair beside his bed while Daniel climbed under his covers, and she began to read. As she read, Maya noticed Daniel watching her with rapt attention, hanging on every word. She added different voices for the characters, making him giggle at her silly impressions. When she finished the chapter, Daniel begged for just one more. One more and then you need to sleep, Maya agreed. After the second chapter, Daniel's eyes were starting to droop, but he fought to stay awake. Maya, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you so nice to me? The other staff members are always busy. They don't really talk to me. Maya set the book down and looked at him thoughtfully. Because you remind me a little bit of myself when I was younger. I lost my dad when I was very small, and I know what it's like to miss a parent. And besides, you're a very easy person to be nice to. Will you tell me about your mom? Dad said she's sick. Maya was touched that Richard had mentioned this to his son. Yes, she's in the hospital. She has a disease that makes her very tired and weak, but she's a fighter. She's the strongest person I know. Is that why you work so hard, to help her? Yes, it is. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I think you're a good daughter. I hope your mom gets better soon. Thank you, Daniel. That's very sweet of you to say. As Maya left his room that night, she felt a warmth in her heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. There was something deeply fulfilling about connecting with this child, about being able to provide comfort and companionship to someone who needed it so much. Over the next few weeks, Maya's evening sessions with Daniel became the highlight of both their days. They read together, talked about everything from science to silly jokes, and gradually Daniel began to open up about his mother. He showed Maya photographs, told her stories about memories he had, and sometimes cried while Maya held his hand and listened. Richard noticed the change in his son immediately. Daniel seemed happier, more animated at dinner, more willing to talk. And while Richard was grateful, he also felt a complicated mix of emotions. He was glad that Daniel had found someone to connect with, but he also felt inadequate, wondering why he couldn't provide that same comfort himself. One evening, Richard decided to observe one of Maya's sessions with Daniel. He stood quietly in the hallway outside his son's room, listening through the partially open door. And then the knight realized that the dragon wasn't actually evil, Maya was saying in an animated voice. The dragon was just lonely and scared, and all it wanted was a friend. That's like me sometimes, Daniel said softly. I feel lonely, but then you come and read to me and I don't feel lonely anymore. You're not alone, Daniel. You have your dad who loves you very much, and you have me, and you have so many people who care about you. Do you think my mom would like you? There was a pause, and Richard found himself holding his breath, waiting for Maya's answer. I think your mom would be grateful that someone is here to make you smile. And I think she would want you to know that it's okay to be happy, even though she's not here anymore. She wouldn't want you to be sad forever. I miss her so much. I know you do, and that's okay. You can miss her and still find moments of happiness. They can exist together. Richard felt his throat tighten. He quietly moved away from the door and walked back to his study. Maya had said in a few simple sentences what he had been unable to express to his son in 4 years. She had given Daniel permission to feel both grief and joy, to honor his mother's memory while still living his life. That night, Richard found himself thinking about Maya more deeply. Who was this young woman who seemed to possess such wisdom and kindness? He realized he knew almost nothing about her beyond the basic facts. He didn't know her dreams, her interests, what had brought her to his household beyond the need for money to help her sick mother. The next day, Richard made an unusual decision. He asked Mrs. to arrange for him to take his afternoon coffee in the garden at a time when Maya would be working there. He told himself he just wanted to thank her properly for what she was doing for Daniel. But there was more to it than that, though he wasn't ready to examine those feelings too closely. Maya was trimming the rose bushes when Richard appeared on the garden path. She looked surprised to see him, immediately standing up and brushing the dirt from her gloves. Mr. Manning, is there something you need? I wanted to talk to you if you have a moment. Please, don't let me interrupt your work. Maya nodded and continued pruning while Richard sat on a nearby bench, his coffee cup in hand. I wanted to thank you for what you've been doing with Daniel. I've seen a real change in him these past few weeks. He's a special boy. It's been a pleasure spending time with him. I overheard part of your conversation last night. What you said to him about his mother, about it being okay to feel both grief and happiness. That was exactly what he needed to hear. Maya looked at him, a little embarrassed that he had been listening. I just told him what I wish someone had told me when my father died. Tell me about your father, if you don't mind. Maya set down her pruning shears and sat on the grass, apparently deciding that if Mr. Manning wanted to have a conversation, she might as well be comfortable. Richard found himself appreciating her lack of pretense. I don't remember much about him. I was only 3 when he left. My mom said he couldn't handle the responsibility of having a family. He just walked out one day and never came back. That must have been very difficult for your mother. It was. She worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. She never complained, never made me feel like I was a burden. She sacrificed everything for me. That's why I have to help her now. She gave up her whole life for me. The least I can do is make sure she gets the medical care she needs. Richard studied her face as she spoke. There was no self-pity in her voice, no bitterness, just a quiet determination and love for her mother. What did you want to do before your mother got sick? Did you have other plans? Maya smiled wistfully. I wanted to go to college, study literature, or maybe education. I've always loved books and learning, but that's on hold now, maybe someday when Mom is better. You shouldn't have to put your dreams on hold. Sometimes life doesn't give us a choice. We do what we have to do. They talked for over an hour, and Richard found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation. Maya had a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. She asked him about his business, and he found himself explaining complex concepts that she grasped quickly. She told him about growing up in a small town, about her mother's garden that she missed, about the library where she had spent most of her childhood. As the sun began to set and Maya had to get back to her duties, Richard realized that he felt more relaxed than he had in months. There was something about talking to Maya that felt easy, natural. She didn't treat him with the careful deference that most people showed him. She was respectful but genuine, and that was refreshing. Over the following weeks, these garden conversations became a regular occurrence. Richard found reasons to be wherever Maya was working, always careful to make it seem casual and work-related. He told himself he was just being a thoughtful employer, getting to know his staff better. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He looked forward to these conversations. He found himself thinking about things Maya had said, wanting to share ideas with her. He noticed things about her, the way she always had a book in her pocket during her breaks, the way she hummed softly while she worked, the way her whole face lit up when she smiled. Mrs. noticed, of course. The head housekeeper noticed everything that happened in the household. One day, she pulled Richard aside. "Mr. Manning, if I may speak freely." "Of course, Mrs. I've noticed you've been spending quite a bit of time talking with Maya. I know it's not my place to comment, but people are starting to talk. The other staff members have noticed." Richard felt a flash of irritation. "I'm allowed to have conversations with my employees." "Of course you are, sir. I'm just concerned about Maya's reputation. She's a good girl, and I wouldn't want anyone to get the wrong idea." Richard paused, Mrs. words sinking in. Was he being inappropriate? Were his attentions toward Maya creating problems for her? The last thing he wanted was to make her uncomfortable or to damage her standing among the other staff. "You're right," he said finally. "I'll be more mindful." For the next few days, Richard deliberately avoided Maya. He threw himself back into his work, taking meetings and staying late at the office. But he found himself missing their conversations, missing the easy companionship he had found with her. Daniel noticed his father's absence too. At dinner one evening, the boy looked at Richard with serious eyes. "Dad, did you and Maya have a fight?" Richard looked up surprised. "No, why would you think that?" "Because you used to talk to her in the garden sometimes, and now you don't anymore. And you seem sad again, like you were before Maya started reading to me." Richard was stunned by his son's perceptiveness. "I'm not sad, Daniel, just busy with work." "You're always busy with work, but you were different for a while. You smiled more." That night, after putting Daniel to bed, Richard stood at his bedroom window looking out at the garden below. He could see Maya in the moonlight, sitting on a bench during her break, reading a book. She looked peaceful and content, completely absorbed in whatever story she was reading. Richard realized with sudden clarity that he had been lying to himself. This wasn't just about gratitude for what Maya had done for Daniel. This wasn't just about appreciating a good employee. He was developing feelings for her, real feelings, and that terrified him. He was a billionaire, a public figure. She was his employee, a maid with no wealth or connections. The world would have opinions about such a relationship. His business associates, his late wife's family, society in general would judge them harshly. There would be assumptions about his motives, about her motives. People would say he was taking advantage of his position, or that she was a gold digger trying to secure her future. But more than that, Richard wasn't sure he was ready to feel anything for anyone. His wife had been gone for 4 years, but the grief was still there, buried under layers of work and responsibility. Was he betraying her memory by having these feelings for someone else? Richard turned away from the window, trying to push these thoughts aside. He needed to focus. Maya had noticed the change in Mr. Manning's behavior. For weeks, they had been having these wonderful conversations that she looked forward to all day. Then suddenly, he was avoiding her. She told herself it didn't matter, that she shouldn't have gotten used to his attention anyway. He was her employer, nothing more. Those conversations had been a pleasant anomaly, but they were clearly over now. Still, she couldn't help feeling disappointed. She had enjoyed talking with Richard, learning about his world, sharing her thoughts on books and life. He had treated her like an equal during those talks, not like an employee. It had made her feel valued in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. But Maya had more pressing concerns than Mr. Manning's sudden distance. Her mother's condition had taken a turn for the worse. The hospital had called to say that her mother needed an additional treatment that wasn't covered by insurance. The cost was staggering, nearly $10,000, and Maya had no idea how she was going to come up with that kind of money. She had spent the last 3 nights lying awake, trying to figure out a solution. She had some savings, but nowhere near enough. She thought about taking out a loan, but her credit wasn't good enough. She considered asking for an advance on her salary, but she was already being paid so generously that she felt uncomfortable asking for more. The stress was taking its toll. Maya found it harder to focus on her work, and she was constantly exhausted from worry. One morning, while she was serving breakfast to Mr. Manning and Daniel, her hands were shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the coffee pot. Maya, are you all right? Richard asked, concern evident in his voice. Yes, sir, I'm fine, just a little tired. But she wasn't fine, and Richard could see that. After breakfast, he asked her to step into his study. Maya, what's wrong? And please don't tell me nothing. I can see something is bothering you. Maya hesitated. She didn't want to burden him with her problems, but there was such genuine concern in his eyes that she found herself opening up. It's my mother. She needs a treatment that costs $10,000 and I don't have the money. I'm trying to figure out how to pay for it, but I don't know what to do. Richard didn't hesitate. I'll pay for it. Maya's eyes widened. No, Mr. Manning, I couldn't possibly accept that. It's too much. It's not too much. Consider it a loan if that makes you more comfortable. You can pay me back over time. That would take me years. Then it takes years. Maya, your mother needs this treatment. Let me help. Maya felt tears streaming down her face. She tried to wipe them away, embarrassed by this display of emotion. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. You've done so much for Daniel, for our family. This is the least I can do. Richard arranged everything. He called the hospital directly and paid for the treatment. He also made arrangements for Maya's mother to be transferred to a better facility with more advanced care. When Maya learned what he had done, she was overwhelmed with gratitude and guilt. How could she ever repay such kindness? That evening, instead of their usual reading session, Daniel asked Maya if they could bake cookies together. Maya checked with Mrs., who gave her permission to use the kitchen. As they measured flour and sugar, Daniel chattered happily about his day at school. Maya, can I tell you a secret? Daniel asked as they waited for the cookies to bake. Of course. I think my dad likes you, like really likes you. Maya felt her cheeks grow warm. Daniel, that's not appropriate to say. But it's true, he's different when you're around. He smiles more. And he used to talk to you all the time until something changed. I think he's scared. Scared of what? Of liking someone who isn't my mom. But I think Mom would want him to be happy, and you make him happy. Maya didn't know what to say. She had noticed Richard's attention, had enjoyed their conversations, but she had never allowed herself to imagine that it might mean something more. The idea was ridiculous. He was a billionaire, she was a maid. They lived in completely different worlds. Your father is just being kind to me because I help with you, Maya said gently. That's all it is. If you say so, Daniel said, but there was a knowing look in his eyes that was far too mature for a 7-year-old. Later that night, after Daniel was in bed, Maya was cleaning up the kitchen when Richard came in. He had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, and he looked tired but content. I heard you and Daniel made cookies. He saved me some. I hope that was okay. He asked if we could bake together. Of course it's okay. Maya, can we talk? They sat at the kitchen table, and Richard took a deep breath. I've been avoiding you, and I want to apologize for that. It wasn't fair to you. You don't owe me an apology, Mr. Manning. You're free to spend your time however you want. Please call me Richard, and I do owe you an explanation. I was avoiding you because I realized I was enjoying our conversations too much. I was looking forward to them too much, and that scared me. Maya's heart began to race. Why did it scare you? Because I haven't felt this way about anyone since my wife died. I've been telling myself that it's inappropriate, that I'm your employer, that we're from different worlds. I've been listing all the reasons why I should keep my distance. And have you convinced yourself? Maya asked quietly. No, I haven't. Maya, I know this is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why this is a bad idea, but I can't stop thinking about you. I value your wisdom, your kindness, your perspective on life. You've brought something into this house that's been missing for 4 years. You've brought light. Maya felt like she couldn't breathe. Was this really happening? Richard, I don't know what to say. You've been so generous to me and my mother. I would never want you to think that I expect anything from you or that I'm trying to take advantage. I don't think that, not for a second. I've watched you, Maya. I've seen how you are with Daniel, how you work, how you treat everyone around you. You're genuine. You don't have a manipulative bone in your body. But what about your world? Your business associates, your friends, what would they think? Honestly, I don't care. I've spent 4 years doing what everyone expected of me, being the strong widower who focuses on business and raising his son. I've been trying to be perfect, and it's been exhausting. For the first time in years, when I talk to you, I feel like I can just be myself. Maya looked at him. seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. This powerful, wealthy man was opening his heart to her, and it was both terrifying and wonderful. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "When we talk, I don't feel like a maid, I feel like an equal. You listen to me like what I have to say matters." "Because it does matter. You matter, Maya." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they had just acknowledged hanging between them. "So what do we do now?" Maya asked. "I don't know, I've never been in this situation before, but I'd like to take you to dinner. A real dinner, not as employer and employee, but as two people getting to know each other." "That sounds wonderful, but Richard, I need you to understand something. I'm not interested in your money. I was attracted to you before you helped my mother, before any of that. I like talking to you because of who you are, not what you have." "I know that. It's one of the many things I appreciate about you." They decided to keep things quiet for now. They agreed to have dinner the following Saturday at a restaurant outside the city where they were less likely to run into anyone Richard knew. They wanted the chance to explore these feelings without the judgment and scrutiny that would inevitably come if their relationship became public knowledge. The days leading up to Saturday felt endless. Maya found herself daydreaming during work, catching herself smiling for no reason. The other staff noticed the change in her mood, though they didn't know the cause. Even Daniel picked up on it. "You seem happy," he observed one evening during their reading time. "I am happy. Your dad arranged for my mother to get the treatment she needs, and the doctors say she's already responding well." "That's great, but I think there's something else making you happy too." Maya laughed. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that." "I know," Daniel said with a grin. Saturday finally arrived. Maya had one nice dress, a simple navy blue sheath that she had worn to a friend's wedding years ago. She did her best with her hair and makeup, grateful for the few cosmetics she owned. When she looked at herself in the mirror of her small apartment, she barely recognized herself. She looked nervous and excited and hopeful all at once. Richard picked her up at 7. He had chosen to drive himself rather than using his usual driver, wanting privacy. When Maya opened her door and he saw her standing there, his breath caught. She looked beautiful, but more than that, she looked radiant. "You look stunning," he said. "Thank you, you look very handsome too." The restaurant was elegant but not ostentatious. They were seated at a corner table with a view of the city lights. For the first hour, they talked easily, continuing the conversations they had started in the garden. They discussed books they had read, movies they wanted to see, childhood memories. "Tell me about your wife," Maya said gently, "if you're comfortable talking about her." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Her name was Caroline. We met in college. She was studying art history and I was in business school. She was everything I wasn't: creative, spontaneous, warm. She balanced me out." "She sounds wonderful." "She was. When she died, I felt like part of me died with her. For a long time, I couldn't imagine ever feeling whole again. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that made sense. Numbers, deals, strategies, those I could understand. Grief, I couldn't. And Daniel. I'm ashamed to say I wasn't there for him the way I should have been. I was so lost in my own pain that I couldn't see he was drowning too. Then you came along, and you showed me what I had been missing. You gave him what I couldn't." "You're giving yourself too little credit. Daniel loves you so much. He talks about you all the time. He just needed to know it was okay to feel what he was feeling." "That's what you taught both of us." As the evening went on, Richard reached across the table and took Maya's hand. The touch sent electricity through both of them. "Maya, I need to be honest with you about something. If we pursue this, if we become more than friends, things are going to get complicated. My late wife's family may not approve. Some of my business associates will have opinions. There will be people who judge us, who make assumptions about your motives or my judgment." "I know that. And I need to know that you're prepared for that. Because once we make this public, there's no going back. I will defend you and stand by you, but I can't protect you from everything people will say." Maya squeezed his hand. "Richard, I've faced judgment my whole life. I'm a black woman who grew up poor in a small town. I'm used to people making assumptions about me. If we do this, we do it because what we have is worth fighting for, and we'll face whatever comes together." "You're braver than I am." "I don't think so. I think we're both scared, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the important things in life are supposed to be a little scary." They talked until the restaurant was closing, neither wanting the evening to end. When Richard drove Maya home, he walked her to her door. "I had a wonderful time tonight," Maya said. "So did I. Can I see you again? Outside of the house, I mean." "I'd like that very much." Richard leaned in slowly, giving Maya time to pull away if she wanted. But she didn't pull away. When their lips met, it was gentle and sweet, full of promise and possibility. When they finally separated, both were smiling. "Good night, Maya." "Good night, Richard." As Maya closed her apartment door and leaned against it, she couldn't stop smiling. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles and challenges. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was over the next 2 months. Richard and Maya continued to see each other in secret. They would go to restaurants in different towns, take walks in parks where no one knew them, and talk on the phone late into the night after Daniel was asleep. With each passing day, their feelings for each other deepened. At the mansion, they were careful to maintain professional boundaries in front of the staff. But sometimes, when no one was looking, Richard would brush his hand against Maya's, or they would exchange a glance that said everything they couldn't speak aloud. Daniel, however, was too perceptive to fool. One evening, while Maya was reading to him, he set down his book and looked at her seriously. "You and Dad are together now, aren't you?" Maya hesitated. She and Richard had agreed not to tell Daniel until they were ready to make their relationship public. But lying to this child felt wrong. "What makes you think that?" she asked carefully. "You both look happy all the time now. And Dad whistles when he's making coffee in the morning. He never used to do that. Plus, I saw you holding hands in the garden last Tuesday." Maya couldn't help but smile. "You're too observant for your own good." "So it's true." Maya took a deep breath. "Yes, it's true. Your dad and I care about each other very much, but we haven't told anyone yet because it's complicated." "Because you're different." "What do you mean?" "You're black and he's white, and you work for us. That's what Mrs. said to the other maids. She said people would talk." Maya felt a flash of anger at Mrs. for discussing this where Daniel might overhear, but she kept her voice calm. "Yes, those are some of the reasons. Some people might not understand or might judge us. But the most important thing is that your dad and I respect and care for each other, and we both love you very much." "I think it's great," Daniel said simply. "You make Dad happy, and you make me happy. I think Mom would approve too. She always said Dad needed someone who would challenge him and make him laugh. That's you." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Daniel. That means more to me than you know." "Can I call you Mom someday? I mean, if you and Dad get married." The question took Maya's breath away. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Your dad and I are still figuring things out. But Daniel, no matter what happens, I will always care about you. You're a very special person to me." Daniel hugged her tightly, and Maya held him close, wondering how she had gotten so lucky to have this child in her life. The next day, Richard received a phone call that changed everything. It was from Robert Hartford, his late wife's father. Robert was a powerful man in his own right, a real estate mogul with connections throughout the city. He had never fully approved of his daughter's marriage to Richard, thinking she could have done better. But after Caroline's death, he had become more involved in Daniel's life, seeing the boy as his primary connection to his lost daughter. "Richard, we need to talk," Robert said without preamble. "I've heard some disturbing rumors." Richard's stomach tightened. "What rumors?" "That you're involved with one of your household staff. A maid, to be specific. Please tell me this isn't true." "I'm not going to discuss my personal life with you, Robert." "Not even when it affects my grandson? Richard, if these rumors are true, you need to end this immediately. Think about what this will do to your reputation, to your business. Think about Daniel and what people will say." "My relationship with Maya has nothing to do with Daniel. In fact, she's been wonderful for him." "Maya, so it is true. Richard, for God's sake, think about what you're doing. This woman is an employee. She has no education, no social standing. People will say you're having a midlife crisis or that she's taking advantage of you. Is that what you want for your son? To have a gold digger as a stepmother?" Richard felt his anger rising. "Maya is not a gold digger. She's kind, intelligent, and compassionate. She's been better for Daniel in the past few months than all of us combined." "She's a maid, Richard. A maid with a sick mother who conveniently needed expensive treatment right around the time you became interested in her. Can't you see what's happening here?" "I paid for her mother's treatment before our relationship began. Maya never asked me for anything. She actively tried to refuse my help. Of course she did. That's how these people operate. They play hard to get, they act humble, and then they hook you. Richard, I'm asking you as Caroline's father, end this before it destroys everything you've built. I'm not ending anything. And Robert, with all due respect, my personal life is none of your business. It is my business when it affects my grandson. If you continue with this, I'll have no choice but to take action. I have lawyers who can make things very difficult for you. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life. End this relationship, or I will pursue legal action for custody of Daniel. I'll argue that you're not in a stable state of mind, that you're making reckless decisions that affect his. Richard felt cold fury wash over him. You would try to take my son from me. I would do whatever is necessary to protect Caroline's child. End this relationship, Richard. That's my final warning. The call ended, and Richard sat in his study, shaking with anger and fear. He knew Robert had the resources to make his life very difficult. A custody battle would be messy, expensive, and emotionally devastating for Daniel. Even if Richard won, the process alone would be traumatic. But the thought of ending things with Maya made him feel physically ill. She had brought joy back into his life. She had helped him heal. How could he walk away from that? That evening, Richard asked Maya to meet him in his study after Daniel went to bed. When she arrived, she could tell immediately that something was wrong. What happened? She asked. Richard told her about Robert's call, about the threats and ultimatums. As he spoke, Maya felt her heart sinking. He would really try to take Daniel from you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He has the money and connections to make it a real fight, and in a custody battle, they'll dig into everything. My relationship with you would be examined under a microscope. They'll make you sound like you were taking advantage of me, manipulating me. Then we should end this, Maya said, though the words felt like knives in her chest. I won't be the reason you lose your son. Maya, no, I'm not giving up on us. Richard, be realistic. Daniel has already lost his mother. He can't lose his father too, and if we continue, that's exactly what might happen. Robert will drag this through the courts and Daniel will be caught in the middle. I can't do that to him. I won't. There has to be another way. Is there? You said it yourself. They'll attack me, question my motives. I can't fight someone like Robert Hartford. I don't have the resources or the connections. I'm just a maid who fell in love with her boss. That's how people will see it. You're so much more than that. Not to them. Richard, I love you. I love Daniel. But I love you both too much to be the reason this family falls apart. Richard crossed the room and took her hands. Maya, listen to me. I will fight for you. I will fight for us. Robert can threaten all he wants, but I'm not letting him control my life. And what if you lose Daniel in the process? Could you live with that? Could I? They stood in silence, both knowing she was right. The reality of their situation was crashing down around them. They were from different worlds, and sometimes that mattered, no matter how much they wished it didn't. Maybe we just need time, Richard said desperately. We can keep things quiet for a while longer, let things settle down. Hiding isn't a solution. Eventually, people will find out. And the longer we wait, the worse it might be. Robert is already suspicious. How long before he decides to act on his threats regardless? Maya pulled her hands away from Richard's and wiped the tears from her face. I need to resign. What number, Maya? You can't. I have to. If I'm not working here, if there's physical distance between us, maybe Robert will back off. And maybe we can both think more clearly about what we really want. I know what I want. I want you. You want me, but you need your son. And right now you might have to choose. I'm not going to make you make that choice, Richard. I'm making it for you. Richard felt like his world was collapsing. In the span of a few hours, he was losing everything that had made him happy again. Maya, please, don't do this. I have to, for Daniel's sake and for yours. My mother is doing much better now, thanks to you. She'll be released from the hospital soon. I can take care of her at home, find work somewhere else. It's time for me to go. What about Daniel? How am I supposed to explain this to him? Tell him the truth. Tell him that sometimes adults have to make hard choices. He'll understand eventually. Maya's resignation was official by the end of the week. Mrs. seemed relieved, which confirmed Maya's suspicion that the head housekeeper had been the one to inform Robert Hartford about the relationship in the first place. The other staff members were sad to see her go, having grown to like and respect her. Daniel was devastated. When Richard told him that Maya would be leaving, the boy cried harder than he had since his mother's death. "Why is she leaving? Did I do something wrong?" "No, son, you didn't do anything wrong. Maya's mother is better now, and Maya has decided it's time to move on to other opportunities." "But I need her, she's my friend." "I know, and she'll still be your friend, just not here at the house." "It's because of Grandpa Hartford, isn't it? I heard him on the phone with you. He said mean things about Maya." Richard was shocked. "You heard that?" "I was walking past your study. He said she was just a maid and that you shouldn't be with her. But he's wrong, Dad. Maya is the best person I know." Richard pulled his son into a hug. "You're right, he is wrong. But sometimes, even when we're right, the situation is too complicated." "That's not fair." "No, it's not fair. But that's life sometimes, buddy. We don't always get to keep the people we love close to us." On Maya's last day, Richard arranged to be out of the house. He couldn't bear to watch her leave, but Daniel insisted on saying goodbye properly. He gave Maya a handmade card with a drawing of the three of them together, Richard, Daniel, and Maya, under a rainbow. "This is what I wish could happen," Daniel said. "I wish we could all be a family." Maya held the card to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "I wish that too, Daniel. I will treasure this forever." "Will I ever see you again?" "Of course, we'll find ways to stay in touch, I promise." As Maya walked out of the Manning mansion for the last time, carrying a small box of personal belongings, she felt like she was leaving her heart behind. She had found love and purpose in this house, and now she was walking away from both. But she reminded herself that she was doing the right thing. Daniel needed his father, and Richard needed his son. She couldn't be the wedge that drove them apart or the ammunition that Robert Hartford used to tear their family apart. Sometimes love meant letting go, even when it broke your heart to do it. Richard watched from his office window as Maya's car pulled away. He had made many difficult decisions in his life, but letting her leave without fighting harder felt like the worst one. He picked up the phone 3 times to call her back, but each time he set it down again. What could he offer her except more complications and pain? That night, Daniel refused to eat dinner. He sat in his room, staring at the walls, withdrawing into himself in a way that terrified Richard. It was like watching his son retreat back into the grief and loneliness that Maya had helped him escape. "Daniel, please eat something," Richard pleaded. "I'm not hungry." "Son, I know you're upset. I'm upset too." "Then why did you let her go? Why didn't you fight for her?" The question hit Richard like a punch. His 7-year-old son was asking him the same question he was asking himself. "It's complicated." "You keep saying that, but I think you're just scared. Maya wasn't scared, she was brave, but you're just letting her go without even trying." Richard sat down on the edge of Daniel's bed, feeling like a failure as a father. "You're right, I am scared. I'm scared of losing you, of making the wrong choice, of hurting the people I love. Mom used to say that being scared was okay, but being a coward wasn't. She said that real courage is doing the right thing even when you're afraid." Richard felt tears in his eyes. Caroline had said that many times, and she was right. He had been acting like a coward, letting fear and other people's opinions dictate his choices. "You know what? You're absolutely right. Thank you for reminding me what your mother taught us." "So what are you going to do?" Richard stood up, a new determination settling over him. "I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight for Maya, for our family, for what's right, and I'm not going to let anyone tell me who I can and cannot love." Daniel's face lit up with hope. "Really?" "Really, but Daniel, this might get messy. Your grandfather might say some unkind things. People might judge us. Are you prepared for that?" "I don't care what people say. I just want Maya to come back. I want us to be Ha the morning after Daniel's challenge." Richard sat in his study making a list of everything he needed to do. First and foremost, he needed to talk to Maya and make sure she understood that he wasn't giving up on them. Then he needed to deal with Robert Hartford, setting clear boundaries and making it known that he wouldn't be intimidated. But before he could do any of that, he needed to understand exactly what legal ground he stood on. Richard called his personal attorney, a sharp lawyer who had been handling his affairs for over a decade. "I need your honest assessment of a custody battle. If my late wife's father were to challenge me for custody of Daniel, what would be his chances?" Was quiet for a moment. "That depends on many factors. What grounds would he claim?" Richard explained the situation, including his relationship with Maya and Robert's objections. Listened carefully. Realistically, Richard, it would be a very difficult case for him to win. You're Daniel's father, you provide a stable home, you have no history of abuse or neglect. The fact that you're in a relationship with someone of a different race or social class isn't grounds for removing custody. This isn't the 1950s. But Robert has connections. He could make things difficult. He could make things expensive and time-consuming, yes. He could drag you through depositions and hearings. But unless he can prove actual harm to Daniel, which it sounds like he can't, his case would be weak. Judges don't remove children from fit parents just because a grandparent disapproves of their romantic choices. Richard felt some of the weight lift from his shoulders. So you think I could win? I think you would almost certainly win. The question is whether you want to put yourself and Daniel through the process. Custody battles are ugly, Richard. They bring out the worst in people. But if you're asking me whether you should let Robert's threats control your life, my answer is absolutely not. After hanging up with, Richard felt a renewed sense of courage. He had been so paralyzed by fear that he hadn't even properly evaluated the actual risk. He had let Robert's threats sound bigger than they were. His next call was to Maya. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. Richard. Maya, I need to see you. Can I come over? I don't think that's a good idea. Please, just hear me out. If you still want me to leave after we talk, I will. But please give me this chance. There was a long pause. Okay, but just to talk. Richard drove to Maya's small apartment, his heart pounding the entire way. When she opened the door, he could see that she had been crying. Her eyes were red and she looked exhausted. It had only been 3 days since she left the mansion, but it felt like an eternity. Thank you for seeing me, Richard said. Maya led him into her modest living room. Her mother was resting in the bedroom, so they kept their voices low. Richard, what are you doing here? We agreed it was over. No, you decided it was over. I never agreed to that. Maya, I spoke with my attorney. Robert's threats are mostly bluster. He doesn't have a real case for custody. The chances of him winning are extremely slim. But there's still a chance. Can you really risk that? I've been thinking about what Daniel said to me. He asked me why I didn't fight for you. He called me a coward. He shouldn't have said that. But he was right. I was being a coward. I was letting fear and other people's opinions control my decisions. And in doing so, I was teaching Daniel the exact wrong lesson about life. Richard moved closer to her. Maya, I love you. I love who I am when I'm with you. You've made me believe in happiness again, in second chances. I can't just walk away from that. What about the judgment, the gossip? People will say terrible things about both of us. Let them. I've spent my whole life caring too much about what people think. My wife used to tell me that I needed to be more willing to take risks to live authentically. I owe it to her memory and to myself to finally listen to that advice. Maya's resolve was starting to crack. Richard, I'm scared. I'm scared of not being enough for you, for Daniel. I'm scared of failing you both. You could never fail us. You've already given us so much. Maya, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to be with us, to take this journey with us, whatever challenges come our way. What about Robert? I'll deal with Robert. I'm going to make it very clear that his threats won't work, and that if he wants to remain part of Daniel's life, he needs to respect my choices. If he can't do that, then he'll be the one who loses out. Maya sat down, overwhelmed by the emotions flooding through her. This is really what you want, even knowing how hard it might be. It's not about what I want, it's about what I need. And I need you, Maya. Daniel needs you. We're not complete without you. Maya looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I love you, Richard. I love you and Daniel so much. I've been miserable these past 3 days. Richard knelt in front of her and took her hands. Then come back to us, not as an employee but as family. Move into the house, help me raise Daniel, be my partner in every sense of the word. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to be part of our lives permanently. And Maya, when the time is right, when we've weathered whatever storms come our way, I'm going to ask you to marry me. But for now, I just need you to say yes to being with us. Maya pulled Richard into a tight embrace, nodding against his shoulder. Yes, yes to all of it. They held each other for a long moment, both feeling like they could finally breathe again. Then Maya pulled back, a practical concern crossing her face. What about my mother? I can't leave her alone. She'll come too. The mansion has plenty of room. We'll set up a suite for her on the first floor so she doesn't have to manage stairs. We'll hire a nurse to help care for her. Maya, I meant what I said about family. Your mother is part of this too. You've really thought this through. I've thought of nothing else since you left. That evening, Richard returned to the mansion with Maya. Daniel was doing homework in the library when they walked in together. The boy looked up, saw Maya, and his face transformed with joy. Maya, you came back. I came back, Maya confirmed, kneeling down as Daniel ran into her arms. I'm sorry I left. I shouldn't have. Dad fought for you, didn't he? He was brave. He was very brave, and so were you for reminding him what matters most. Over the next few days, Richard worked to make good on his promises. He had the staff prepare a suite for Maya's mother, hiring a full-time nurse and making sure the room was equipped with everything she would need. Maya's mother, Alice, was weak but alert when she was moved to the mansion. When Richard met her for the first time, she studied him carefully. So you're the man my daughter has fallen in love with, Alice said, her voice soft but firm. Yes, ma'am, and I'm the man who has fallen in love with your daughter. She tells me you have a son, that you're a widower. That's right. Alice nodded slowly. My Maya has a good heart, too good sometimes. She'll put everyone else's needs before her own. I need to know that you won't take advantage of that. Mrs. Johnson, I promise you that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your daughter's love. She's made my life and my son's life immeasurably better. I will never take that for granted. Alice smiled. Good answer, and call me Alice. If we're going to be family, we might as well start acting like it. The hardest conversation was still ahead. Richard called Robert Heartfelt and asked him to come to the mansion for a meeting. Robert arrived with his attorney, clearly expecting a fight. They sat in Richard's study, tension thick in the air. Robert, I want to be clear about something. I'm in a relationship with Maya Johnson, and I intend to marry her eventually. That's not up for discussion or negotiation. Then you're a fool, Robert said coldly. You're throwing away your reputation and your son's future for some woman you barely know. I know her well enough to know that she's kind, intelligent, and good for Daniel. She's helped him heal in ways I couldn't. If you can't accept that, then we have a problem. We certainly do have a problem. I won't stand by and watch you make this mistake. Then let me make something else clear. If you pursue custody of Daniel, you will lose. I've spoken with my attorneys, and they've confirmed that your case has no merit. But more importantly, if you try to take my son from me, you will lose Daniel in every way that matters. He'll never forgive you for trying to break up our family. Robert's attorney leaned forward. Mr. Manning is right. A custody challenge would be expensive and ultimately unsuccessful. You would damage your relationship with your grandson for nothing. Robert glared at his attorney, clearly not appreciating this honesty. So what do you suggest? That I just accept this situation? I suggest that you think about what Caroline would have wanted, Richard said. Your daughter loved you, Robert, but she also wanted Daniel to grow up happy and loved. Maya provides that. She talks to Daniel about his mother, helps him process his grief, gives him the emotional support he needs. Can you really say that's a bad thing? She's not his mother. No, she's not, and she'll never try to replace Caroline, but she can be someone who loves him and helps him grow. Isn't that what matters? Robert was silent for a long moment. What about her background? What about the fact that she was your employee? Her background is that she sacrificed her own dreams to take care of her sick mother, that she worked tirelessly to provide for her family, that she showed kindness to a lonely child when no one else did. Those are the facts that matter, not her skin color or her bank account. People will talk. Let them talk. I care more about Daniel's happiness than I do about gossip. The question is, do you? Because if you truly care about your grandson, you'll support what's best for him, even if it's not what you would have chosen. Robert stood up abruptly. I need time to think about this. Take all the time you need, but know that my decision is final. Maya is part of this family now. You can either accept that and remain part of Daniel's life, or you can fight it and lose him entirely. The choice is yours. After Robert and his attorney left, Richard felt emotionally exhausted but also relieved. He had stood his ground, advocated for his choices, and made clear what his boundaries were. Whatever Robert decided, Richard knew he had done the right thing. 3 weeks passed with no word from Robert. During that time, Maya settled into her new life at the mansion. She wasn't working as a maid anymore, but she found herself naturally taking on the role of household manager, helping to organize schedules and coordinate the staff. She also spent hours each day with Daniel, continuing their reading sessions and helping him with his homework. The relationship between Maya and Richard deepened with each passing day. They took walks in the garden in the evenings, talking about their days and making plans for the future. They cooked dinner together on the cook's nights off, laughing and making a mess in the kitchen. They felt like a real family. The staff adjusted to the new dynamic. Mrs. remained somewhat cold to Maya, but she was professional and did her job well. The other staff members were mostly supportive, especially after they saw how happy Daniel was. One afternoon, Richard received an unexpected phone call from Robert. "I'd like to take Daniel to lunch," Robert said without preamble. "Just the two of us, I want to talk to him." Richard's first instinct was to refuse, but he knew that Daniel loved his grandfather and needed that relationship. "All right, but Robert, if you say anything to upset him." "I'm not going to upset him. I just want to talk to my grandson." Daniel was excited about having lunch with his grandfather. Robert picked him up on Saturday and took him to Daniel's favorite restaurant. As they ate burgers and fries, Robert studied the boy carefully. "You seem happy," Robert observed. "I am happy. Maya makes everything better. She's teaching me to paint, and she tells the best stories, and she talks to me about Mom without getting sad." "You miss your mother." "Every day, but Maya says that's okay, that I can miss Mom and still be happy. She says Mom would want me to be happy." Robert felt a lump in his throat. "She's right about that. Your mother would want you to be happy above all else." "Do you like Maya, Grandpa?" Robert was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know her very well, but I can see that she makes you happy, and that matters." "Are you going to try to take me away from Dad?" I heard him on the phone talking about custody. Robert was shocked that Daniel knew about this. "No, son, I'm not going to do that. I was worried and scared, and I made some threats I shouldn't have, but I can see now that your father is doing a good job taking care of you." "He is, and Maya helps. We're a family now." "Tell me about Maya. What do you like about her?" Daniel's face lit up as he talked about Maya, about how she helped him with nightmares, how she was teaching him to bake, how she let him ask any questions he wanted about his mother. As Robert listened, he began to see Maya through his grandson's eyes, not as a threat, but as someone who genuinely cared for the boy. When Robert brought Daniel home that afternoon, he asked to speak with Richard and Maya together. They met in the living room, Maya sitting close to Richard, both of them clearly nervous. "I've done a lot of thinking over the past few weeks," Robert began. "And I've talked to Daniel. I can see that he's happy, truly happy, in a way he hasn't been since Caroline died, and I can see that Maya is a big part of that." He looked at Maya directly for the first time. "I owe you an apology. I judged you without knowing you, made assumptions based on prejudice and fear. That was wrong of me." Maya was stunned. "Thank you for saying that." "I won't pretend that I don't have concerns. This situation is unconventional. People will talk. But Daniel is what matters, and he needs stability and happiness more than he needs grandfather who is stuck in the past." Robert turned to Richard. "I'm withdrawing any implied threats about custody. Daniel belongs with you, and apparently with Maya as well. I would like to remain part of his life if you'll allow it." "Of course," Richard said. "Robert, you're his grandfather. We would never try to keep you away from him. And Maya, I hope that over time we can get to know each other better, for Daniel's sake." "I'd like that," Maya said softly. After Robert left, Maya burst into tears of relief. Richard held her close, both of them feeling like a huge weight had been lifted. "We did it," Maya whispered. "We really did it." "We did," Richard agreed, "and this is just the beginning." 6 months later, on a beautiful spring evening, Richard took Maya to the garden where they had first really talked. The space had been decorated with thousands of fairy lights, and a small gathering of close friends and family was waiting. Daniel stood at the front, holding a small velvet box. Richard got down on one knee and took Maya's hand. "Maya, you came into my life when I had given up on happiness. You showed me that it was possible to love again, to take risks, to be brave. You've been a blessing to me and to Daniel. You've made us a family. Will you marry me?" Maya was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Richard slipped the ring on her finger, and Daniel rushed forward to hug them both. The small crowd erupted in applause. Alice was there, now much healthier, wiping tears from her eyes. Even Robert was present, having developed a genuine appreciation for Maya over the past months. Mrs. had been invited as well, and while she maintained her stern expression, there was a softness in her eyes as she watched the happy scene. The wedding took place 3 months later. It was a small, elegant affair held in the mansion's garden. Daniel served as the ring-bearer, taking his job very seriously. Alice walked Maya down the aisle, too proud of her daughter to let anyone else have that honor. As Maya and Richard exchanged vows, they both reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment. Maya had come to the mansion as a maid, desperate to help her sick mother, never imagining she would find love. Richard had been a broken widower, hiding from life behind his work, never imagining he could feel whole again. But life had surprised them both. It had tested them with obstacles and judgment, forced them to be brave when it would have been easier to give up. And they had chosen each other again and again until there was no other choice to make. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Richard kissed Maya as their family and friends cheered. Daniel stood between them, holding both their hands, his face shining with happiness. "We're really a family now," Daniel said. "We were always a family," Maya corrected gently. "From that very first night when you asked me to stay with you, that's when we became a family." Richard pulled both Maya and Daniel into an embrace, feeling more grateful than he ever thought possible. He had learned that love wasn't about perfection or following society's expectations. It was about finding someone who made you want to be better, braver, more authentic. It was about choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. As the sun set over the celebration, Maya looked at her husband and stepson, at her mother laughing with the guests, at the beautiful life they had built together from such uncertain beginnings. She thought about that night she had slept on the floor holding Daniel's hand, never imagining where that simple act of kindness would lead. Sometimes, she realized, the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary moments. A child crying in the night, a hand held in comfort, a choice to stay when leaving would be easier. These small acts of grace can change everything if we're brave enough to let them. Maya had been brave enough, and now, surrounded by love and laughter, she was exactly where she belonged, home again. Richard pulled his son into a tight hug. "Then that's exactly what we're going to do." Exactly where she was supposed to be in being a better father to Daniel. That was what mattered. Everything else was a distraction he couldn't afford. Whatever it was, Richard knew that this night had changed something. He just didn't yet understand what.